Will Russia unleash its Oreshnik missiles to avenge Ukraine's mega drone attack? By now, you would have seen the headlines. Ukraine launched an audacious drone attack on Sunday, a massive coordinated strike that hit deep inside Russian territory. The operation was codenamed Spiderweb. It saw drones target at least 5 air bases in Russia, stretching from the Far East Amur region to the Arctic region of Murmansk. The scale was staggering. More than 40 Russian bombers were reportedly engulfed in flames. President Zelensky called it an attack undoubtedly meant for the history books. But Russia did not stay silent. In a swift and brutal counter-response, it launched a wave of overnight missile and drone strikes across Ukraine. The attack was timed just hours before the second round of the direct peace talks was set to begin in Istanbul. In fact, the talks concluded with Zelensky saying that Ukraine and Russia are working on a fresh exchange of prisoners of war. Zelensky was speaking in the Lithuanian capital, where he was attending a meeting of the Central European and Nordic states.
Today we see the situation clearly. If Russia turns the Istanbul meeting into an empty talk, there must be a new level of pressure, new sanctions, and not just from Europe. We need to work on joint sanctions at the G7 level, including with the United States and with everyone in the world who wants peace. It's very, very important that each of our partners supports this exact approach.
His aide, the Ukrainian Defense Minister, Rustem Umerov, told reporters in Istanbul that all key issues at the Russia-Ukraine talks could be resolved at the leadership level. But we couldn't help but ask, will Russia stop at targeting just Ukrainian cities, or is something far more devastating on the cards? Perhaps in the form of its Oreshnik IRBM. Just look at the developments from the battlefield. Deadly Russian attacks left a trail of destruction across Ukraine. In Zaporizhia, shelling reportedly killed 5 civilians. In Sumy region, a drone strike injured 6, including 2 children. In Donetsk, Russia reportedly captured 2 more settlements. Both sides also ramped up drone activity. Russia claimed its air defenses shot down 162 Ukrainian drones, with the bulk intercepted over the border regions of Kursk and Belgorod. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported that 80 Russian drones and 4 missiles were launched overnight, striking 12 targets inside its territory. But drones were not the only weapons in play. On Sunday, 2 rail bridges collapsed in Russia, in Bryansk and Kursk, regions that border Ukraine. This was before the Ukrainian drones pounded Russia's airfields. Moscow's investigative committee, in fact, has called the incidents acts of terrorism. In Bryansk, an explosion derailed a passenger train with 388 people on board, killing 7 and injuring 66. In Kursk, a freight train was hit by a blast, injuring the driver and 2 assistants. These back-to-back strikes on airfields, transport infrastructure, they all represent Ukraine's level of sabotage and drone warfare deep into Russian territory to date. Already, across Russian social media, pro-Kremlin bloggers have described Ukraine's drone attack as Russia's Pearl Harbor. Russia's Pearl Harbor. A symbolic and humiliating breach as well that demands a strong response from the Kremlin. In fact, speculation is already swirling online. Will Putin escalate? Will he threaten nuclear force again? And as far as Ukraine goes, what was it really hoping to achieve? Because here's the reality behind those headlines. Ukraine's military is under immense strain. Nearly 90,000 cases of desertion or unauthorized leave were reported in the year 2024. In the first 3 months of 2025 alone, there have already been over 45,000 cases, and many frontline units are operating at just 40 to 50% capacity. US military aid is also dwindling. What about Europe? It just lacks the production muscle to actually fill that gap. And against this, Ukraine's drone blitz seems less a strategic turning point and more a desperate attempt to try and reshape the battlefield momentum or even gain leverage before the peace talks. But the question is, will it work? And if the past patterns are anything to go by, it offers a cautionary tale. In August 2022, after a Ukrainian strike on Russia's Black Sea fleet, Russia launched weeks of missile attacks on cities like Kharkiv, Dnipro. In 2023, repeated Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian targets were met with relentless Russian bombardment of Ukrainian positions, intensifying the brutality of the war. Last year's incursion into Kursk fizzled out. In August 2024, Ukraine's big cross-border raid in Russia's Kursk region, it ended this year with Russia reclaiming the entire territory and a brutal offensive in eastern Ukraine that is still underway. Now, once again, we may be on the cusp of another brutal phase. The bigger picture here is this escalation a game changer? Because Ukraine's gains have been sporadic and short-lived. In fact, according to reports, Russian forces have captured nearly 580 square kilometers in May alone. So yes, Ukraine has dealt a big blow to Russia this time with Operation Spiderweb, but in the grand scheme of things, with troops and arms shortage as well as faltering Western support, the battlefield still remains grim. And after its second round of direct talks with Russia in Istanbul, Ukraine's drone assault could either shatter fragile hopes for peace or force Russia to the table with renewed urgency and fury. Because one thing is clear here, Moscow rarely absorbs humiliation quietly. And the question still is, it's no longer if there will be retaliation, but how big and how soon it will come. It's one of the most sacred traditions of Eid al-Adha, the ritual sacrifice of livestock. But this year in Morocco, that tradition is being paused, policed, and in some places banned altogether. With livestock numbers plummeting and red meat prices soaring, Moroccan authorities are cracking down hard ahead of Eid, shutting down illegal markets, intercepting trucks, and even urging citizens to skip the sacrifice entirely. Across the country, security forces and local administrators have launched a widespread control campaign. Local officials and police are monitoring the borders, rural roads, markets, to stop the sale and transport of sheep intended for sacrifice. Several trucks, in fact, have already been seized and there are reports filed against drivers. This weekend itself, authorities shut down several weekly souks near Casablanca as part of the national effort to halt all Eid-related livestock transactions. In Deroua, authorities intercepted 2 trucks carrying illegally slaughtered sheep. The seized meat was immediately destroyed to prevent it from reaching the market. The crackdown comes after a rare appeal from King Mohammed VI, who called on the Moroccans to forgo the ritual sacrifice this year. The country's dwindling livestock population, decimated by drought and rising fodder costs, prompted fears of a national food crisis. The government hopes this will curb the skyrocketing meat prices and preserve livestock for the months ahead. Interestingly, civil society groups are also backing the government's crackdown, calling for tighter controls to prevent black market sales, especially of banned offal like doora. For a country where Eid sacrifices are deeply traditional, this is a drastic measure, but one that Morocco says is important to protect food security. A difficult but necessary sacrifice for the country's future. On to Saudi Arabia now. This story is about a major crackdown on illegal entry to the holy city of Mecca. Saudi authorities have stopped more than 269,000 people without Hajj permits from entering Mecca. What more is known about the move and what do the rules say? Let's break it all down for you. According to the rules, only those with permits will be allowed to perform the Hajj pilgrimage, even if they live in Mecca year-round. Saudi authorities have imposed fines of up to $5,000 and other punitive measures like deportation for anyone performing the pilgrimage without a permit. And according to Saudi authorities, unauthorized pilgrims made up large numbers of those who died in the summer heat last year. There are currently 1.4 million Muslims in Mecca officially, with more expected in the days to come. Muslim worshippers were seen performing the ritual, the circumambulation of the Kaaba and praying in Mecca's Grand Mosque. Hajj is the annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca and involves a series of religious rituals. It's a once-in-a-lifetime obligation for every Muslim who can afford it and is physically able to do it. Shifting focus for now, it's been a tense weekend in Paris. PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, held a victory parade in the French capital a day after beating Inter Milan 5-0 to win the Champions League. Celebrating the historic win, Luis Enrique and his players went on an open-top bus with thousands of fans lining up the streets. As the bus stopped for a photo opportunity, pyrotechnics were set off behind the players, with the colors red, white and blue drifting through the air. But mayhem and violence also unfolded in Paris over the weekend as celebrations turned into clashes with the police. 2 people died, a large number got injured, over 500 people were arrested by the French police. Bus shelters were smashed, projectiles hurled at riot police who fired tear gas and water cannon to push back the surging crowds. According to the French Interior Ministry, a 17-year-old was stabbed to death in a southwestern town during a gathering to celebrate the Parisians' victory, while a woman riding a scooter died after she was hit by a car in the southwest of Paris. The French Interior Ministry added that 491 people were arrested in the capital itself. Flares, fireworks, torched cars, smashed bus shelters marked a chaotic night in France.
We're really not in favor of that violence on Champs-Élysées. We're a family, I even have children, and I wasn't able to bring them to the Champs-Élysées last night because you never know. So sure, we're not very proud of some people who are just looking for that.
Authorities had anticipated wild celebrations, and to manage the situation, over 5,000 police officers were reportedly deployed. The police used tear gas after the celebrations turned chaotic. Security was tightened around the iconic Paris Avenue. A day after the incident, the police used metal security barriers and vehicles to block off the Champs-Élysées and surrounding streets. On to the United States now. The FBI is investigating an incident in Colorado as a potential terrorism case. The attack injured several people at a public rally to support hostages in Gaza. The incident unfolded when a man allegedly launched a flaming device into a crowd. Witnesses said he shouted, "Free Palestine," as he deployed the homemade flamethrower. Authorities arrested the suspect and identified the man as 45-year-old Mohammed Suleiman, a resident of El Paso County in Colorado. The FBI said 8 people were injured and hospitalized. The injured including 4 men, 4 women, from 52 to 88 years old. The organization behind the rally, a group called Run for Their Lives, said the gathering started around 1 p.m. local time, adding the attack happened shortly after emergency responders were alerted when callers reported that people had been set on fire.
Came out today. Our officers rushed as quickly as they could somewhere close to the area, and they immediately ran into a chaotic situation where a man was throwing Molotov cocktails and using other devices to hurt people.
The local police have not yet declared the incident as an act of terrorism. However, FBI officials are treating it as such.
The suspect was heard to yell "Free Palestine" during the attack. The subject has been identified as Mohammed Sabri Solomon, and he's 45 years old. As a result of these preliminary facts, it is clear that this is a targeted act of violence, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism.
And on social media, the FBI director called the incident a targeted terror attack. The director of U.S. National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, meanwhile, said her counter-terrorism team is assisting the FBI and the local law enforcement with the investigation. The U.S. Homeland Security Secretary also confirmed her department is monitoring the terror attack closely. Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, alleged on X that the suspect had overstayed and was in the country illegally. The incident comes just 2 weeks after two staffers at the Israeli embassy, remember, were fatally shot in Washington, D.C. Attacks that are increasing concern about the escalating violence linked to international conflicts and rise in possible anti-Semitic incidents.